Yeah, I think I call it a future ready mindset. And that's, three words I smashed together a few years ago, and it's kind of picked up, and lots of people are talking about similar things, is this recognition that we didn't used to have to keep up with change. We didn't need the skill set to look to the future and to figure out what was next and what was next and what was next. And very often we sat back and the organization kind of feeds it to us, or the market movements tell us what we need to do next.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. This is David, and today I'm here with Allister Frost. Allister Frost, he's the author and the creator of the Future Ready Mindset, and he's a speaker who empowers business leaders and teams to thrive in uncertainty. He was Microsoft's first digital marketing strategy leader and an award-winning speaker for global giants like 3M, Vodafone, Cisco, and Airbus. He helps leaders leverage change by activating these three AI-defeating human superpowers: curiosity, creativity, and courageous communication. Allister, welcome to the podcast.
That's the one. Thank you, David. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you about why I believe there are so many smart, talented leaders out there who may soon be obsolete in the workforce if they fail to keep up with all this change.
There's a lot of fear and a lot of stagnation and complacency. If you want to put all that together, roll with it, people. Come on, change is not constant. Change just happens, right?
Yeah, we need to get into it. Change is the opportunity you need to grab. Absolutely, 100%.
Yes. Well, let's talk more about that. You have this framework to help people discover more about themselves. And we talked off camera about, if you want to be able to lead organizations, you want to lead other people, you need to learn to lead yourself first. And you are helping people lead themselves, right?
Yeah, I think I call it a future ready mindset. And that's, three words I smashed together a few years ago, and it's kind of picked up, and lots of people are talking about similar things, is this recognition that we didn't used to have to keep up with change. We didn't need the skill set to look to the future and to figure out what was next and what was next and what was next. And very often we sat back and the organization kind of feeds it to us, or the market movements tell us what we need to do next. And if we're honest, back in the day, it's sort of 15 odd years since I was in the corporate world at Microsoft, you could kind of sit back and then let changes kind of come organically. Your team would look to you as a leader to bring the changes, but really it was pretty slow. Nowadays, you don't get that pass. It's just relentless and fast. So it's very easy to get caught in what you were starting to describe there in the intro, caught in your comfort zone of doing things a certain way and not always being hungry and ambitious enough to look for what's next. That's a skill our parents and grandparents didn't have to have because the world was slower. We need to build it now.
Yeah. And this is not just applicable to the job. I feel this is applicable to an individual's evolution as a human being. Giving you an example, love my parents, bless their hearts. They're in their 80s. But even when they were earlier in their lives, it was, you see a new restaurant, you try to say this in Spanish or Italian, and they try it, and the first time they try it, like, oh, I'll never learn, I'm too old. And you're like, actually, no. You can say por favor. Like you can learn how to roll some R's, okay? But it was, I'm too old. And that's the mindset. Yeah.
Our parents are quite a good poster child. My mum's kind of my poster child for adamant refusal to accept technological progress. Yeah. And, she's never had any interest in it at all. Never wanted to move on. Can't figure out the TV remote control. And she's not an idiot. She's a really smart woman, but it wasn't her thing. However, that now in time, that comes back and gives you real problems downstream because you turned a blind eye to it. And now the world is that way. What do you do? How do you keep up? It's a struggle. So my entire thesis, this whole future ready mindset thing, is it is about the individual. Everybody has to have their own approach to it, because what's right for you is not right for somebody else. But you've got to be aware of what what's the rut that you're potentially getting stuck in? What is it that you're just doing because it's familiar and easy, and that's kind of the way it's always been done? And should you be examining that and changing some things in your life? And that's where the process that I have helps people to get out of that rut.
Is it fear or something or some other things that hold people back?
It is actually, it's a very natural human instinct. It's about loss, really. Change. people think that people are resistant to change. Oh, I don't want to change, and because of the workload that's involved, or because they don't like doing change and so on. Actually, that's not the truth of it. When we look at the studies, people are brilliant at change. Human beings, we're literally, let's be honest, we're wired for change. That's why we're kind of destroying the planet, not the monkeys or the or the snakes or the worms. Or we are the most agile, adaptable species on Earth, without question. So we're very good at change, but we're also very aware of the losses that potentially come from change. So when you get resistance in an organization, more often than not, when we look at it, it's actually people are fearful of the loss. What are they going to lose? They're going to lose status. They might lose autonomy. They might lose experience that they've spent a lot of time gaining. They might lose friendship groups because people will be restructured and moved around. So that translates into resistance to change, or worst case, it's actually people actively fighting back or coming up with competing agendas to slow the change down. Now, that's not a healthy thing in a world that's changing very quickly. So inside an organization, the leader's job is to think about these processes and think about how they can get their team to come with change. And that's where their individual motivation comes into play.
Humans focus on loss. And it's, like working in sales for a number of years. That is actually a psychology some of the best salespeople tap into is when you're selling to anyone, they don't focus on what they could gain from, say, your training, your framework, from what you can learn. They tend to focus on what am I losing out on if I make this change. And I wonder now, like the label here is ready already, right? This is something you do, right? How do you reframe loss?
I try and put it into a positive spin. I mean, when you talk to people about loss and this, people might recognize it in themselves, but they don't believe that that's actually what's driving their behavior. So they tend to be quite conceptual models and things. So it's not really about, as a leader, you don't want to talk to your team about the nature of loss. You want to talk to them about what it is that drives them and what it is that they want to achieve and where their future could be. So there is always a progressive thing. But you're right, there will always, the fear of losing something is always far greater than the pleasure we got in getting it in the first place, right? We were talking about my new microphone here. It's lovely to get it. But if someone said, "Oh, sorry, we're going to have to take that away," that would feel far worse than the joy I got from unboxing it in the first place, because it's like, no, that's mine now. That's part of me. So when I talk to people, and the process that you started to mention there, Ready Already, is the name of, that's my book. I've got a book called Ready Already that explains this process. But there's a cycle in there, the Ready Already growth cycle. And it's a really simple 5-step process that can allow anybody to kind of get out of the rut, get unstuck and make change their friend. And so it is about an individualistic thing. And so I don't encourage leaders to talk about loss or relationships with change and stuff like that. I actually start in the middle of my model, which is here for anyone who's watching on video. If you're not, if you're listening to this, then it's, what is it? It's kind of a pentagon shape with a thing in the middle. In the middle of the pentagon is something called personal mission, and there are 5 steps on the outside. Some people call it the Frost cycle because it actually spells my name if you look at the initials. But personal mission is the compelling motivator of why you do the job that you do. That is bigger than your salaries, bigger than your status, bigger than, all of the stuff that we probably think about when we say, why do you do your job? It's the difference you make to the world. And leaders need to tap into that thing and try to get people to see that their job is more than just a series of tasks. If they do their task well, downstream consequences of that are that the world may be a better place. Someone may have a job, someone may have prosperity, someone may smile. And there's a story I often tell. When I first arrived at Microsoft, I came in thinking, I want to work on cool, sexy, futuristic technologies. And they put me in charge of email. They made me a marketing guy for Outlook and Exchange. Outlook, probably the most hated product in the entire suite. It's like, thanks, Microsoft. Brilliant. And honestly, I was quite depressed for a while. And I thought, I don't really want to do this. This is, who the hell hasn't heard of email? What is there to say? But when I started looking at it, I realized that if I was to make this opportunity as big as it could be for me, I need to reframe my mind. And I looked around and realized the whole world runs on email, doesn't it? Every company, every government. And yet everybody hates it. Everyone's terrible at it. And I recognized that if I reframed my mission as I make the world better at email, suddenly I felt really motivated just to do that job. And part of that job was, obviously, if you use the latest version of Microsoft Outlook, you'll have better email and you get these new features. Mm-hmm. But fundamentally, I was driven as a person and my team to make the world better at email. And the minute we did that, we had a reason to create the future, a reason to want to improve things beyond, oh, let's hit the scorecard target, let's achieve the KPIs, all of that dull stuff. Yeah. And it became a mission, and we were driven.
Yeah. It sounds like you made email sexy again.
We tried to make, but email actually, like any technology, if we're honest, when you actually take away the features and the buttons and the bells, it's an incredible thing. Isn't it amazing that you can use, instantly receive stuff around the world and so much can happen. And when you can light that up in people's minds, they can be more interested in email and yes, more likely to buy for Microsoft's sake and anybody else selling products, the next version of the product. But there were other times when I was at Microsoft and I completely lost my personal mission. I lost a compelling motivation. I couldn't see what the value was I was bringing to the world. What difference does it make if I do this or not? And so that's why I think it's really important that every individual in an organization has their own personal mission, something that they care about that relates to their work, of course, but more importantly to who they are as a person.
So I have a question around that, like personal mission. I think when people think about personal mission, they think it needs to be some big, grandiose thing about changing the world, saving puppies, cleaning up all the oceans, all microplastics are gone. And I feel that is probably the wrong way to think about personal mission. But I'd like to
really simple to reframe it. When you can reframe it in a very simple way, is to think about your job. Let's say, I don't know, let's say you work for a local government and your job is to manage communication with local residents and put out a newsletter or something. And you could say that's your job. Now, if you were to bump into a stranger or down in a restaurant or whatever, and they said, what do you do? You'd probably say, oh, I'm a communications manager at the local council. That's not enough. That's not enough to create the brilliant future you need. You need to look at it beyond that. And actually what you're doing is by communicating with local residents and giving them information, you're creating a sense of wellness for those people. You're encouraging people to create a better citizenship, better neighborhood where they live. You're doing a load of things. So we don't need to sort of imagine what they might be. But your personal mission is what you do to earn your success in the service of others. What is it really is the key to happiness in life, and it's the fuel most important that you need to keep going and to keep wanting to do it again and again and again. And so your personal mission, if you're that council worker or whatever it is, it would be something much more real. And if you think about it, if you do a good job, somebody chooses to live in that area, they can buy affordable housing, they can maybe get a job, they can get married, have kids, adopt kids. And actually your personal mission could be something like, I make happy families, which has got nothing to do with sending out a newsletter, but it's incredibly motivating. It's a reason to get out of bed on a Monday morning, isn't it?
Yeah. So for those listening who are struggling with finding a mission in their job, whatever their job might be, right? It could even be like, I'm a mom or dad staying at home, taking care of my kids. I'm in an entry-level job, stapling things, or I could be an executive and I'm getting hit from left, right, and center with zero appreciation from individuals. How do they start discovering their personal mission?
Well, think about what would happen if you didn't do your job to the best of your ability. If you got lazy and you just cruised through life and you didn't do that job. So let's take it's a bit of a cliche, I know, but let's think of someone who's maybe a cleaner and they go into a local school and they clean up the classrooms. You could think my job is to vacuum, put things away, tidy it up so it's ready for school the next day. And you can do that for the rest of your life and think that's all you do. No, you need to stop and say, what would happen if I don't do this? And realize that, the teacher would come in, it would be chaos. The kids wouldn't have wouldn't have safe spaces to sit. Somebody might get sick because the room wasn't clean. And suddenly you realize that you are important. You're doing more than just putting things away. You're creating an opportunity. And then say, okay, but what happens because I do a good job? And you realize, kids get a great education. Maybe I'm creating the next generation, the next astronaut. I don't know what they'll go on to become. Teachers are going to have a good day. They're going to go home and they're going to leave on time because they can go and spend time with their family. That's what you do. And that's what motivates you to pick things off the floor and clean the floor and do that job again and again. But not just to do the job the same way, but also to say, well, I really want the kids in this local area to have the best education they can. Suddenly you can start looking at your job and saying, how could I do this even better? What could I do to be quicker, more efficient, to make it even cleaner or even brighter? What can I do? That's a future-ready mindset coming into play from your personal mission, because you're starting to believe there's more than just the present way of doing it. There's a better way of doing it.
How does self-respect, respect for yourself, how have you seen that come into driving someone to do their best work?
I think it's a tricky question. I think the self-respect thing, you've got to believe in what you're doing. And that really has to come from you. For a lot of us, we look to leaders or an organization to sort of build our status, to give us an ego, to tell us that we're doing a good job. And you can't always rely on that happening. It is far better with this model to think about what it is that you do in the service of others and to make the job your own, to accept that you are an agent of change. Yes, there'll be outside influences that will always shake things up and come unexpectedly, but your self-respect comes from the fact that you believe you are the best person to do that job, and you are going into work every day looking for what you can improve, not to do it the same way, but looking for things, little things that you can make better. That is the output of a future-ready mindset, and that's what you get from if you work through the whole ready growth cycle that's in the book.
Thank you for that, Allister. I'm curious, Allister, the gentleman behind the method, Allister Frost. What made you want to pursue this, helping people discover their personal missions?
It really comes from the fact that I worked at Microsoft for 10 years and I was really at the bleeding edge, and I was exhausting myself and my team, frankly, trying to keep up. And I realized that the rest of the world was a few years behind, let's be honest. You know, there's often the case in the tech industry. There's things that we're doing that we're trying to achieve that are not going to hit other industries for some time. And that's why I stepped out of the world of the corporate world and decided I want to help other organizations to think the way that we thought. Personal mission is just one component of what I do, but it is so central because I just cannot see anybody creating a brilliant future for themselves if they don't have a reason to do so. And if I go back to what I said right at the start, I'm really concerned. There are a lot of very talented, smart, hardworking people in the workforce today who will be utterly obsolete if they don't recognize that the world is changing and they need to have new skills and they need to learn and grow. And we've had growth mindset. The concept of growth mindset has been around for about 20 years, not quite 20 years, would you believe it? When I went to school, because I'm in my 50s, you know, the dominant mindset was a fixed mindset, is that you have a certain amount of ability born out of your DNA and your society and your location, whatever.
There's still some elements of that.
Ceiling. Yeah. I know. I mean, it's terrifying to think, but that was the dominant way of thinking. Then growth mindset came in. We said, oh, okay, it is possible for people to strive, to push, to grow, to move on. But that's not enough, because growth mindset doesn't contain the fuel. It doesn't give you the reason to do that stuff, because it's hard work growing. It's hard work putting yourself out there and having ideas and being brave enough to say, this needs to change. This could be better. So that's what really motivates me. That's what got me wanting to help people, because I could see that they were really struggling and facing this tsunami of obsolescence. And now it's really kicking in because AI and more advanced technologies are coming into the workplace and showing us how pointless many jobs will become.
What's your take on that? I asked a lot of people this in my friend group. Like, I work in a tech company, and so I'm around the you talked about the bleeding edge, where honestly, like, the rest of the world is, quite frankly, probably a decade behind. Never mind, the last 2 years with ChatGPT and other technologies. But I'm curious what your take is on what this inflection point might look like with AI. And it is very relevant to the people who you work with and I work with too. They come to us because there's some sort of change and there's some sort of dissatisfaction. There's some sort of fear that's involved. And I'm curious, where do you see this inflection point of AI and change going with
I think AI is an obvious one to go to, and in part of my process is I ask people to what they're going to follow. That's literally the first step. After you've got your personal mission, what's the first step? I say, what do you want to follow? Follow is the one thing that you should focus on. And I try to get people to literally create a list of all the things they're not very good at, but they should be better at in the near future. And of course, AI features on nearly everybody's lists because they're kind of aware of it. They've played with it, but they know they could do more. But there's lots of other things on there. There'll be legislative changes. There'll be very work-related things. People will often say, I need to be better at presenting. They see me speaking, they say, I want to be able to present and perform and do things like that better, whatever. That's where AI sort of comes in. And the thing with AI is it is really easy to use, and it's so pervasive that many of us have had a play because you literally go to a website and play. And many people see it and they think, wow, what a great answer. That's exactly what I need to say, or that's how my email should be written, whatever they've given to the GPT. The trouble is it truly the best that you could do? It's plausibly better, but it's really just fluent bullshit a lot of the time. If you actually start scratching the surface, it's not as good as you can make it. So the key thing that I always say is, even when you're working through the cycle, use AI. Absolutely, it's an amazing research tool. But don't just take things at face value. Don't just copy and paste that thing and think that's good enough. It isn't, because if it is good enough, we don't need you. Because you're literally now the interface between a computer screen. What value have you added? You've got to look at stuff and say, okay, how would I make this better? How can I teach the AI even further and try to take it to a deep level? So I have no issue with it. I think it's a remarkable tool. I do think it is, like most advanced technologies, a live experiment on human beings, and we don't know what the outcome will be, just as we didn't know, and we're still not really sure what the net result of social media will be on the human race. So I think it's a wonderful tool, but it's dangerous if you just take it at face value.
Yeah. I guess right at the beginning when I was doing your introduction, we talk about the human defeating superpowers, or AI defeating superpowers: curiosity, creativity, courageous communication. I guess, like, when you think about those three characteristics, what do we need to do?
Those three things are in my model. I mentioned it's Frost: follow, react, open, surprise, and tell. And open, surprise, and tell, there's a chapter on each of them in the book, are the three superpowers, because these are things that I do not believe technology will ever do as well as a brilliant human brain. And they are, as you said, curiosity, creativity, or imagination, as I sometimes refer to it, and human communication. So if we take that first one, for example, open in my model is called open because I want people to open their mind to different possibilities. Now, AI is very good at giving you information from existing data sets. And it can also do random stuff very well, but it will generate lots of random stuff. What it can't do is human curiosity. We don't actually know how the human biological brain does curiosity, how it's curious about things. But when we're kids, when we're children, we are brilliant at curiosity. We'll ask why about anything. Why have we got to go shopping? Why do I need to eat food? Why do I have to sleep? Why do I have to put shoes on? They'll ask all those questions, not because they want to be difficult, but because they're trying to make sense of the world and they're trying to feel safe within it. As adults, we ask why a lot less often because we don't want to look silly. And we're not prepared to ask those questions. But the open step in my model is really brilliantly about looking at the status quo, looking at your current world of work, and asking why things are the way they are. Why do we do this? Why do we have a meeting here? Why do we have a different price for that customer? Why? Very often, when you start asking naive, childlike questions that begin with why, you start to realize there's not a lot of reason for things being the way they are. There might have been in the past, but they're kind of out of date now. It's just, well, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So what it does is it opens your mind, doesn't give you the answers. That comes in the next step in my process, but it opens your mind to the fact that that thing could be different, couldn't it? And the example that I put in the book is, I remember at Microsoft asking the question, why is the Monday meeting always on a Monday? And it's a lovely question. I remember everyone looking at me like I'd gone mad because it's like, it's the Monday meeting. Yeah, but why is it on a Monday? And it's like, well, I suppose it's at the start of the week. Yeah, but why is it at the start of the week? And if you just keep asking why, eventually you sort of start to peel it away and you realize, oh, it was the guy before me who put it in place as a Monday meeting because he was in the office on a Monday, and we've just kept doing it. Now, if no one actually stops and says, why is the Monday meeting on a Monday? We'll be having Monday meetings for the rest of our lives. And then, so suddenly you start realizing, actually, this could be different, couldn't it? It's a really basic example.
Yeah, I hate
But if you
Monday
don't
meetings.
ask why, you don't see the possibilities.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Like, and when I think about my best work in my lifetime so far, it has always been when I've gone back to it's a sense of play, and with a sense of play and curiosity, there's joy that comes from it, because you're not defending anymore. You're playing with ideas. You're looking at possibilities. You're not canceling things out. You're not applying those adult filters that we have where we don't ask why. We're asking why not? Why or why not? Like, why is it like this? And why not like this? And I found I've done my best work when I've made the time. And this is the key thing. It's enough. I've managed enough people over the years, and they say, I don't have time. And that's where I ask, why? I'm busy. Why are you so busy? And 9 times out of 10, you realize that they are literally digging into things they have no business or should not be. It's a sense of FOMO, a sense of like, well, if I'm not there, things might go wrong. Well, there's trust issues. There's other problems they have, right? There's systemic issues that they're not dealing with. And that's why they don't feel like they're thriving, right? And so it's very
But with all these things, it really does take, let's be honest about this. This isn't easy, because it takes courage to be that person who will say why, who will ask questions, who will challenge the way things are around here. And a lot of people are fearful of upsetting the apple cart. They just rather sort of slip beneath the radar, frankly, have a relatively easy life because they're not sort of putting themselves out there, and all the risk that comes with being someone who's an ideas person, who's striving, who's pushing forwards. And a lot of leaders as well, let's be honest, are guilty of this as well. They get into the role, and actually the best thing they can do is keep it all the same. So I'm very much of the view that I was taught at Bill Gates told me this at Microsoft, is that today, if something works, it's obsolete. And I think it's a really smart way to go to work each day, to go in and say, just accept that someone somewhere somehow has figured out a better way to do literally everything we do, right? And they have. They might not be able to market it the same way as your company or whatever else, but there is always a better way of doing almost everything. So that gives you absolute permission to try and make one thing better. That's it. It's like, oh, okay, so I can improve things. Yes, you can. And it's not right to sit back and wait for somebody else to do that. If that thing relates to your personal mission, if it's something you can see, if it's something that you have an idea about, then it is absolutely on you to have a go. And that's, again, where the process sort of helps people step through that, so that they're not feeling vulnerable, they're not exposing themselves, and they're getting other people on board to help them along the way as well.
All right. Well, Allister, I end every podcast asking the exact same question, and everyone always has the same reaction. My question to you, the final question is, what's one question I haven't asked you, but I should have asked you?
What if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? What if we do all of this work and then we still come out the other end and realize we still can't keep up with change? That's the thing. And that question of what if it doesn't work is, it does sometimes hit me when people say that, and they're right. There is a real risk with the pace of change that's going on in our world, that you could throw yourself 100% into the ready growth cycle, the future ready mindset. You could be pulling up trees, making transformative change. And in a few years, it could all be ripped away from you because it's just moving so quickly. And the truth is, I don't have an answer to that, because none of us know where this technological experiment is going to take us. So the only thing I have is the knowledge that you can try within the existing paradigm, try the best you can to keep up, to be relevant, to know that you're taking proactive steps to shape, and ultimately, I hope, create the brilliant future that you will love and that you deserve. Keep going.
The question I would love to ask and counter to that is, what if you don't try?
Yeah, well, there's always that. It's like, well, if you don't try, you kind of know what the end result is.
Yep.
You're on the same path as you're already on. So the worst case, in a way, is you have a try, you realize it's a bit difficult or beyond you, or it doesn't work. At least you've learned that in the process. And it takes a lot of encouragement. So for any leaders listening into this podcast and thinking about this stuff, don't underestimate the amount of support that your team need to have the courage to have ideas, to innovate, to try to improve things, and to put themselves on the line, because that's literally what they're doing, with an idea. So nurture that stuff, build that culture, try to get people with a future-ready mindset, and that they in turn will take the pressure off of the leader's shoulders, because the ideas will be coming from the right place, from the people doing the work, rather from the leader who's been given the badge of honor to somehow predict the future. And of course, they're rubbish at doing that, just as I was.
All right, Allister. Well, thank you very much for making the time to stop by the podcast today. If people need to find you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, you can find me online. If you want to get hold of a copy of my book, you'll find that in the bookshops. But you can visit readyalready.me. It's readyalready.me. And you'll find the links there and more information about the process and how you can get in touch. Drop me a note. I love hearing from people.
All right. Thank you, Allister. And thank you, everyone, for listening in to this episode of the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. If you like this, please click subscribe and, smash that button. And the more listeners, the more followers, the more we can make even better episodes for you. See you later. That's a wrap on this episode of the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm David Fung, and my mission is to help leaders grow, lead with impact, and build thriving teams. If you found this valuable, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow leader. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.